Hey everybody, and welcome back. I know, another deja vu again. We've got another Klipsch model in for upgrades. I told you I had another Klipsch still waiting in the wings out there. This is it. This is the center channel. This is the RC-64 III, and it came with its own set of problems, and we're going to go over some of that stuff and talk about it, and I'm going to try to use this as a little bit of a teachable moment. So when you guys are looking for center channels, you can kind of keep some of this stuff in mind. Ideally, for a center channel, it's going to be handling vocals and dialogue, and what its job is to project an accurate reproduction of the input signal to the seated listener over a wide angle, because in a theater, you may be seated off to the left, off to the right. You may have double rows of seating in your house, or you just may have a couch and seats on the side or something, and you want those people to all hear the dialogue. And in this case, due to the arrangement of the speaker and the design of this thing, there's going to be people who are sitting to the left or to the right that aren't going to hear what was originally intended from the input signal. You're going to hear huge holes in the response. And the reasons for that is, with this design, all four of these drivers are in parallel. So they took 16 ohm drivers, paralleled all of them, which gives you really high sensitivity, but also gives you a 3.3 ohm minimal impedance load. So fairly low impedance load. So keep that in mind. If you have one of these things out there, your amp it's gasping to keep up with this thing because it's drawing current at that low of an impedance. Sensitivity is high because of that. So you've got all those drivers in parallel. So each time you parallel one of those drivers, you're increasing its output because they're not in a series parallel configuration. Now, here are the drawbacks of doing that. When all four of these woofers are playing the same thing, then the acoustic centers are pretty far apart. So if you're sitting straight in the middle of it, the time arrival from one woofer to the other is the same. But as soon as you move over a seat, now you're 15, 20 degrees off axis. And so the time arrival from this woofer versus the woofer way down there at the other end is considerably different. So what happens when the time arrival becomes really different is those wavelengths start to do this, and they arrive out of phase from each other. So when they're out of phase, they cancel each other out, just like noise canceling headphones or something. Same exact premise. And you get a huge hole in the response. And that's exactly what you're getting with this speaker. Also, the parts quality, it's typical Klipsch stuff. At least they use all polycaps on this model, and the inductors, some of them are iron core inductors and little sandcast resistors. The wiring is just PVC jacketed stuff, so pretty inexpensive stuff, and that's sucking some of the life out of it as well. Those little iron core inductors are muddying the vocal region, and that's exactly what you want in a center channel, is you want to have a clear vocal region. So let's look at the measurements on this thing and let's see what it's doing, and let's look at what I was able to do with it. Let's first look at the on-axis frequency response, and if you just look at it as an average, it's not that bad. It's within plus or minus 3 dB if you don't look at the very top end. However, the top end takes quite a dive, and there's about a 9 dB swing in output from 10K to 20K. That's a pretty big suck out there. You also notice it looks pretty choppy. And with that choppiness comes some stored energy there. There's some ringing going on, and it's just a mess. So let's look at this a little bit differently this time. Let's look at a before and after, and let's look and compare the original on-axis response and then right below it the new frequency response. Let's take a look at the difference, and as you can see, there's quite a difference there. Some of those peaks are there in the tweeters response. They needed notch filters to notch that stuff out. They did nothing like that, so there's a lot of ringing there and a lot of brightness that over time would cause a lot of listening fatigue. Whereas When I was through with it, it's got a nice accurate response. It's smooth from end to end. Sensitivity is lower because of the arrangement that I did with the drivers. I changed things up quite a bit. Instead of all of these playing the same, only the inside drivers are playing all the way up to the tweeter. The outside ones are playing just the lower ranges only. Another thing I did to help that off-axis problem is let this tweeter play on down a little lower. It plays down really low due to the horn loading of the tweeter. So what I did was just let it go on down there to where it can naturally play. So a lower crossover point plus only crossing these woofers to the tweeter made for much better off-axis response. Let's look at the original crossover. Let's look at that one. And then the new crossover response with the new network on there. And as you can see, a lot different. And you can see where a lot of those peaks are coming from. If you look at just the woofer's response on the original crossover, it rolled off nice and smooth. So if you just had those woofers playing on their own, it's not a huge problem there. However, once you added the tweeter to it, and you don't go in there and notch out to that ringing, it's pretty rough. And I pulled that crossover point back a little, as you can see in the new crossover response. Tweeter can handle it just fine. That's a pretty robust tweeter, and it's really the horn that's increasing its output down low. Electrically, the parts that I have on it are not letting it see a lot of low frequency, but the horn is increasing the low frequency output of the speaker or of that tweeter. So it's really not the kind of stress you would think is being put on it from it being playing down that low. Now, let's look at the big stuff here. Let's look at the horizontal off-axis response. That's going left to right. As you can see, let's put the original stock one here, and right below it, the new revised version. Now, if you look at the stock version, if you can stay within 10 degrees, you're not that bad off. But as soon as you get to 20 degrees or more, it's completely a disaster. You notice the yellow line is 20 degrees off axis, the green is 30, and the blue is 40 degrees off axis. And as you can tell, it's just gone. There's no output there. You're 20 dB down almost in output if you move over that far. And that's not that far. 30 degrees over is not that far. That's almost as if there's a couch in front of the speaker and you're moved over one seat. And if you move over further than that, it's a disaster. And if you look at with the new upgrade, 10 degrees off axis hardly even moves at all. 20 degrees off axis still really smooth. It isn't until you're 30 degrees off axis you start to see a little bit of a dipped area there, but you're only looking at about 4 dB down through that region at 30 degrees off axis, whereas before, if you look at the green line, it's gone. It's a complete hole. Check out the blue line, which is 40 degrees off axis on the new one. As you can see, it's starting to get a little choppy there, that far off. But 40 degrees off axis is pretty far. But still, you're going to hear some dialogue out of this thing, whereas with the original crossover, nothing at all. Let's look at the vertical off axis. Vertical off axis on these things are not that bad. We're not looking at a big, massive degree of change. We're not changing the phase on anything. The time arrival is still the same. We're just looking at the off-axis response. On the original, it's choppy, but drops off evenly. On the newer version here, it's perfectly flat, and the off-axis is still perfectly flat. So if you've got this thing under a TV or above a TV, if you've got it down low and you're setting up high, it's not going to make any difference. The response, as far as the measured response, is going to be about the same. Also, let's look at the biggie. Let's look at spectral decay. Let's throw up the stock spectral decay and then the new spectral decay with the new crossover. And as you can see, it drops off much cleaner. That peak that was there in the tweeter's response down low, as you can see in the stock spectral decay, there's a lot of stored energy there, and it's just taking longer to dissipate, so there's ringing going on there. That's going to be very irritating to listen to. That's going to be one of those things where you just want to, after a while. That's rough. The impedance was, as you can see, let's look at the old impedance and the new. It dipped down to 3.3 ohms, hard load to drive. The new impedance, it looks a little crazy there, but there's a much higher impedance load because of the way I wired these things. It's going to be an easier load for your amplifier. It's a little bit of a higher impedance down low versus up top, so there's not going to be a lot of current demand on the amplifier with this new crossover. So what do we get for that too? The old crossover, as you may have noticed from the picture, kind of cheesy. Bonding posts in the back, cheesy bonding posts, steel nuts on it, all that good stuff. We're getting all that out of the signal path. All the inductors now are all high quality air core inductors. I know you see a lot of them here. There's 6 inductors here. A couple of these are little notch filters in the tweeter circuit, and they just use polycaps and resistors, so we're not looking at a lot of monies there with these smaller parts and with just a standard polycap. We're not looking at big bucks, but it's fixing ringing at the top. I also bypassed some of the resistors that were bringing the tweeter level down with a small cap, which lifted the rolled off top end. So if you look at the original frequency response, you'll see the top end was really sucked out of it. There was like a 9 dB spread there. And if you look at the new on-axis frequency response, you'll see only a dB or 2 drop at the very top. Very balanced now. So a lot of that air and spaciousness and stuff that was completely truncated, it's all back there for you to hear everything. All the caps in the tweeter circuit are all sonic caps, so you're going to hear a much cleaner signal transfer than what it was before. The ones there in the woofer circuit, we've got some larger just polycaps. I've got an RC polycap here in a Solon, handling things down low on the woofer. We got new high quality wire, high purity wire, again, tube connectors to get that old cheesy bonding post out of the signal path. That's going to make a nice improvement from one end to the other. It's going to come with the solder you need, heat shrink, our support, everything you need to implement this thing. And you can mount these on separate boards and set them behind the woofers. Easily go in there and drop them in the places where you can easily wire it all to it. So not a difficult one to do. There's a lot of parts there on the tweeter circuit, but it's not hard to wire it all up, and we can help you along the way. Also comes with a sheet of no-res, and it's going to need that sheet of no-res to really control some of the ringing on this cabinet. You can probably hear on that, and I hope I'm not just shaking the microphone to death. It's a little rough. There's a brace here, and all of this area is unbraced. So the sheet of no-res, you want to primarily cover these areas on the end and control some of that ringing, and that's going to tighten up that bass response and clean up those vocals. And all of that came to a total of, I think it was for, what did we come to this on? I think $469. And then after I included the solder, heat shrink, and all the little stuff, I think it was $475. I think it came to. So $475 for everything, including our support, which I know a lot of you get stumped. You call us up and we help you through it. That'll get you back on track with this thing and get you to hearing what you thought you may have been getting when you bought this thing. A lot cleaner sound. And I guess that's it for this one. I appreciate you guys tuning in, and I know you keep sending me Klipsch speakers, and I'll continue to do whatever I can with them and help you guys out. There's a lot of these things out there, and I just feel like I owe it to all my customers to help them get those things fixed. And it's a good DIY project, and it gets you into DIY. A lot of the customers that have done this stuff contact us later and say, man, that was great. I had enjoyed that project. It really made an improvement. I'm really interested in some of your kits now, and that's kind of the reason we do this. It's an introductory into DIY. It moves you up the performance chain a little bit. It allows you to enjoy your music, and then you come back to us when you need new speakers, or you want to try a kit or a servo sub or something like that. It's almost a lost leader for us to throw all these upgrades out there, because we're just making money on the parts, which is pretty low margin for us. But I enjoy doing it, and keep them coming, and I'll keep doing what I can with you guys. Thanks for watching again. Please hit the subscribe button if you haven't, and we'll see you in the next video.